عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. بسم الله الذي لا إله سواه، والحمد لله، والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وآله وصحبه ومن والاه. اللهم تقبل منا صيامنا وقيامنا وصلاتنا. اللهم وفقنا للعمل الصالح الذي يرضيك. اللهم افتح مسامع قلوبنا لذكرك. اللهم اجمع قلوبنا على محبتك وطاعتك. اللهم زين قلوبنا لك واليوم العرض عليك، وأقمنا بصدق العبودية بين يديك. اللهم اجعلنا من الذين يستمعون القول فيتبعون أحسنه. آمين يا رب العالمين. As a reminder, وإن الذكرى تنفع المؤمنين, reminders are useful to those who have faith. In that context of what we have been reciting lately from Surah At-Taghabun, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, وَمَنْ يُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ يَهْدِ قَلْبَهِ. وَمَنْ يُؤْمِن, before that, He said subhanahu wa ta'ala, ما أصاب من مصيبة إلا بإذن الله ومن يؤمن بالله يهدي قلبه والله بكل شيء عليم. ما أصاب من مصيبة إلا بإذن الله ومن يؤمن بالله يهدي قلبه والله بكل شيء عليم. First, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says what means whatever occurs of calamity in this life, on earth, whatever difficulty of any kind, challenge of any kind, hardship of any kind, affliction of any kind, musibah, that befalls somebody, and usually we use that term for that which is uncomfortable, we don't like, of any sort, musibah. Though musibah literally is from asaba yusibu, it's something that occurred. But it is, when not qualified, it means an affliction, calamity, hardship, something we do not desire and do not wish for. ما أصاب من مصيبة إلا بإذن الله. That occurs only by the permission of God, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once something has happened, then everyone must know, and we must know, that was the creative will of Allah Azza wa Jal. تلك مشيئة الله الكونية سبحانه وتعالى. There is nothing that can occur in the realm of existence and beyond, if there is, without the knowledge of Allah and without the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now keep in mind something, when something has occurred and we say it has been the will of Allah Azza wa Jal, that does not necessarily mean that Allah loves that. There are things that have happened, that do happen, that is always within the creative will of Allah, al-mashi'a al-kawniyya lillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala, but Allah does not love them. When we say something happens with His mashi'a, it doesn't mean necessarily He loves it. He has allowed it. If He did not will it to be, it will not be. What He wills to be does not mean He loves it to be. Kufr exists. Kufr exists. Disbelief exists. If He did not will it to be, it will not exist, because there is nothing that occurs in creation without His will. Otherwise He's not God, subhanahu wa ta'ala. But He does not love kufr. He does not love kufr. But He wills it to be. He wills it to be simply means it is within, excuse me, the context of His control. and of His knowledge and of His irada subhanahu wa ta'ala. So keep that in mind. إن الله لا يرضى لعباده الكفر. Allah does not like and is not satisfied and pleased that His ibad are in kufr. But does He will it to be? If He did not will it to be, it will not be. So just keep this. Some might find difficulty seeing this. This is a very fine point, and it's very logical, and it's very clear. ما يريد الله سبحانه وتعالى هذا لا يعني أنه يحبه سبحانه وتعالى. There is nothing that occurs, good or bad, without His mashi'a, irada. That does not mean He loves it. He loves what is good and He does not love what is evil. And evil exists on account of His permission, and we have the freedom to choose. Shaitan is the epitome of evil. Will shaitan exist without the will of Allah that shaitan exists? Anyone who believes that is a murtad. He's a kafir. Because he would have rejected certain necessary attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills that some of His most beloved servants go through pain. Does He love that? That's a different question. Willing does not mean, in the context of speaking about the divine, does not mean loving. When we will something, maybe we love it. But Allah Azza wa Jal, when He wills something, it's not necessary that He loves it. It's simply to say that nothing occurs and exists or happens inside or outside without His control and His will and His knowledge subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is aqidatuna. So, ما أصاب من مصيبة إلا بإذن الله. Any affliction that occurs, anything that happens, calamity, hardship, it is only by His idhn. If He did not will it to be, it will not be. Khalas. Otherwise, He's not God. In other words, God is not in control. There are things that can happen outside of His will. And that's not the attribute of the divine subhanahu wa ta'ala. But at the same time, we repeat, He wills that which He sometimes does not love. And He wills sometimes that which He loves as well. Subhanahu wa ta'ala. ما أصاب من مصيبة إلا بإذن الله. And then comes after that, وَمَن يُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ يَهْدِ قَلْبَهِ. And the one who has iman in Allah, Allah will guide his heart. What does that mean? Well, isn't the one who believes already guided in heart? What does it mean, guides his heart here? وَمَن يُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ. If you have iman in Allah, and iman is where? Is in your heart. Allah will guide you. What does it mean? Well, first, inshaAllah ta'ala, of what it means, that those who have iman in their hearts with Allah Azza wa Jal, when calamities occur, when they are facing challenges, when they are walking in the dark, as we sometimes put it, Allah will guide their hearts to see clearly in the midst of those affliction and challenges and calamities and darknesses. Allah will give them huda. Huda is they see with their hearts where they're going. What's the next step? What's the best course to take? What's the best solution? What's the response to this? Allah guides their hearts. versus those who don't have that iman. When we are faced with affliction, challenges, calamities, tribulations, hardships, darknesses, we navigate in the dark. And we truly don't see clearly. And we make decisions that are terrible. And our responses are even worse. And we think that's the right thing to do. That's one who does not see right. Because the qalb doesn't see. It's not about seeing physically. It's about seeing conceptually and spiritually. وَمَن يُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ يَهْدِ قَلْبَهُ. That's why the person like that, when faced with those dark challenges, he most likely feels inside not as constricted, not as helpless, not as angry, not as restless, not as agitated, not as insecure, not as unclear as the one who does not have that. وَمَن يُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ يَهْدِ قَلْبَهُ. And all the challenges we face, you face, we face, family challenges, social challenges, political challenges, moral challenges, economic challenges, all sorts of challenges we face. How do we respond? One is guided and one is not guided. Those whose hearts are guided will respond the wise way, the right way, the good way, because they see in the darkness. Those of us who don't see in the darkness, metaphorically speaking, will strike anywhere. And surely, most likely, our solutions and our responses will be wrong. وَمَن يُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ يَهْدِ قَلْبَهُ. Second, يَهْدِ قَلْبَهُ also means, and it is in the same context, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants him or her yaqeen. يهدي قلبه إلى اليقين. Certitude. Certitude, yaqeen. First yaqeen, consistent with what I said a moment ago, is he or she will have yaqeen that what has happened is with Allah Azza wa Jal, from Allah, and Allah is in control. Yaqeen. This is the qada of Allah and His qadr. Not in the cynical sense. Not in the negatively passive sense. But this is a dynamic spiritual awareness. Qada'ullahi wa qadaruh. Once it has occurred. Once it has occurred. Qada'ullahi wa qadaruh. And if I have done something wrong, then I should be looking at what I have done wrong and to rectify that. When I say qada'ullahi wa qadaruh, it doesn't mean I lose responsibility and I give up responsibility. If I truly understand qada and qadar, now I have to rectify what I did. Because part of the qada and qadar is that what we do is part of qada, and the result is part of qada. So if I did something wrong that led to something bad, yes, it has occurred. It is qada'ullahi wa qadaruh. But I shouldn't say this is qada'ullahi wa qadaruh. Stripping myself from responsibility. Well, I didn't pray Asr. I didn't pray Fajr. Qada'ullahi wa qadaruh. It's past. Khalas. Is it qada'ullahi wa qadaruh? Yes, it is. What does it mean, however? Well, you have committed a terrible mistake. You will be had to account for. I have to ask Allah to forgive me. And I have to do my best so that it doesn't happen again. That's part of guiding my heart. If I respond in this way, that's a sign that the heart is guided. But if I respond in qada'ullahi wa qadaruh and I give up responsibility, that's a heart that is still in darkness. It's not a guided one, guided heart. Allah grants yaqeen, certitude, that what has happened, it is in His control subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I have to assume my responsibility. I should never accuse Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I should never accuse Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The fools amongst us human beings, and there are many, of what they do, the fools amongst us, is instead of accusing ourselves and themselves, they accuse Allah Azza wa Jal. And they attribute to Allah inconsistencies, or they attribute to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mediocrities, and they attribute to themselves intelligence and know-how and wisdom, and they don't make mistakes. God makes mistakes. Wal-'iyadhu billah. Don't accuse Allah Azza wa Jal, especially in the musibah context, especially in the affliction context. Don't accuse Allah. At that moment, the person is very weak. Unless the heart that is guided, Allah keeps it strong and saves it from making the horrific blunder of accusing Allah Azza wa Jal. That's the heart that is guided. A man came to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Imam Ahmad relates. A man came to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and said, Ya Rasulullah, أي الأعمال أفضل? Ya Rasulullah, tell me, what are the deeds that are best? And I've said, I think before, when this expression comes, أفضل الأعمال, it does not necessarily mean in the superlative form, that is the best, there is nothing like it. No, when it comes like this in many hadith, it means usually, or oftentimes, it means, tell me some of the a'mal, some of the deeds that are very good. So it is expressed with the superlative form, أفضل الأعمال, in the meaning of, tell me something that is fadil, very good. Not necessarily أفضل in the superlative form, meaning there is nothing else. And here actually you can, in this text, you can see that. Just pay attention to this when you read texts like that in the Arabic language. So he said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the answer was, إيمان بالله وتصديق به وجهاد في سبيله. He said, إيمان بالله, إيمان in Allah, faith in your heart, in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Second, تصديق به, تصديق, that you are a person who testifies and declares to the truth of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala communicates. تصديق به, إيمان بالله وتصديق به. And that's why, and therefore, what He communicates to us, what He tells us, تصديق به. Thirdly, وجهاد في سبيله, and to strive and struggle in His way subhanahu wa ta'ala in the many forms that jihad may take, depending on the circumstances. Now the man answers, he said, this is, some of them were blunt, especially Bedouins. He says, Ya Rasulullah, أريد أهون من هذا. Ya Rasulullah, I want something easier than this. Afdal, so I told him, I want something, easier than this. I'm just this mediocre person. So he says to him, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he says, السماحة والصبر. The other answer gave him, السماحة والصبر. To be one who is سموح, مسامح, easy to deal with, not difficult, not too demanding, not too complaining, not too critical, not too easy. He hears a nasiha, it's easy. He trades, he's easy. He disagrees, he's easy. Doesn't mean illogical or so irrational. Musamah. Family problems, he's easy. Social issues, he's easy. Samaha, easy. Was-sabr, they go together. And sabr, you all know. Sabr, patience. Perseverance in patience. This is, he says, of the best of deeds. Now the man says, Ya Rasulullah, أريد أهون من ذلك. Even this he said, Ya Rasulullah, I desire something easier than this. No. Rasulullah is not there to, to give the songs ما يطلبه المستمعون. Whatever you want to hear, he gives you. He was giving him still what he needs and the truth. So he says to him on the third account, he said, لا تتهم الله سبحانه وتعالى فيما قضى لك به. End of quote. لا تتهم الله فيما قضى لك به. Do not accuse Allah in what He decrees for you. Do not accuse Allah in what happens to you, in what He decrees upon you. With that, I leave us, inshallah ta'ala, and I pray that Allah Azza wa Jal will guide our hearts and will help us be of those who always navigate clearly in the midst of darknesses. May He never leave us to us, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.